What is a mother's love? Many of you will say that this is the most wonderful and sincere feeling on earth, and I agree with you. But I've only ever read books and watched movies about this kind of love. Sadly, I've been brought up in an orphanage since my birth. As a very small baby, I was left at the door of the orphanage. I was less than a month old, and I was very thin and hungry. The caregivers named me Isabella, but soon enough, I was just called Bella. Life in the orphanage was okay for me. We woke up early in the morning, did exercises, ate, studied, and then helped with cleaning and washing. We lived as one big family, but on a schedule, like in a camp. I had good friends and mates. Yes, we were not actual family, but considered ourselves brothers and sisters. We were sincerely happy when someone was adopted, cried, and waved goodbye, sadly seeing them off. Each of us wanted to find a family and to have a mother. In the orphanage, we were looked after, brought up as good people, taught wisdom, but this could not replace a real family. I kept a diary in which I wrote all my experiences, dreams, and hopes. At the end of each page, I left, "I want to find my mother." After that, I would tightly squeeze the diary and fall asleep. I did not know anything about my parents, who they were, where they came from, and why they did this to me. I was offended, angry, but deep down, I dreamed of finding and hugging them. Years passed. And one New Year's Eve, the orphanages in our city were all invited to an event with the president. We were so excited. They promised a cool day with performances from celebrities, artists, and many, many gifts. All kids loved the New Year very much because on this special day, we were surrounded with care and attention from everyone. The day of the event had come. There were 2 large buses parked at the orphanage. We got inside and cheerfully went to the event. All the way there, we sang songs, told funny stories. When we arrived, we saw a huge Christmas tree near the concert hall. Its lights glittered and fascinated everyone around. It was incredibly beautiful. At the entrance of the building, there were food stands with sweets, popcorn, and soda. A little further down, there was a stand with books, with different comics and magazines as well. I ran there, had my cash ready in my hands, and was just reaching for a comic book when I suddenly saw some lottery tickets there. On them, it said, "Let the new year fulfill your most exciting dream." After some time thinking about it, I took one ticket and handed the money to the seller. I so sincerely believed in the New Year miracles. Pressing the ticket to my chest, I repeated to myself, "I want to have a mom." The seller began to carefully scratch the ticket with a coin, starting from the last number. I got a 0, then another, and another. Having sighed, I realized that it would be just zeros, and the New Year miracle did not happen to me. And then, unexpectedly, the seller's face changed. He looked at me in amazement and shouted at the top of his voice, "1 million! You won $1 million!" Everyone, both my friends and our caregivers, looked around at me. They all ran up to me and took my ticket in surprise, not believing in my win. I was so excited, I couldn't help it. And I did not even think about the money, about such a large amount. I just realized that it would bring me closer to having a mom and a family. A company representative that did the lottery came and handed me a certificate. We took a photo, and the next day, everyone was talking about the girl from the orphanage who won $1 million. I firmly decided to find out where my family is and asked my caregivers to help me with this. As you can imagine, before then, I would not have been able to make it all happen without the money because hiring detectives, digging through archives, searching, no one would help me for free. While the caregivers were looking for any information, a woman came to our orphanage and introduced herself as my mother. I remember that moment. Miss Linda ran into our bedroom and screamed that my mother had come for me, picked me up, and held me up with joy. Without wasting any seconds, I ran into the hall where my supposed mother was waiting for me. A beautiful, middle-aged woman appeared before me. She smiled timidly, like she was embarrassed to be here. Seeing me, she rushed to greet me and hugged me tightly. I started crying, but I did not really understand what to do. Yes, I dreamed of this meeting all my life. But as it turned out, I was not mentally ready for it. We went into a family room where I started asking my mom about myself. She spoke in general terms, which alarmed me a little. She said that she could not raise me at the time, that she was alone without a husband, that there was nowhere to live, and that she could not keep her child. I don't know why, but there was no honesty in her words, and as I looked at her, I could not see any resemblance. Yes, I technically could be like my dad, but I just did not feel that she was my real mother. And then, unexpectedly, another woman came into the family room. She ran up to me and screamed, "Daughter, daughter!" with tears in her eyes. To say that I was surprised is to say nothing. I dreamed of seeing my mom, and now there were two at once. I wondered what would happen next, and I got suspicious that no one of these women was my mom. They were just women who found out about my lottery win and wanted to adopt me because of the money. All the fun began when the second woman saw the first. They began to swear and accuse each other of lying, giving evidence that it was her who was telling the truth and the second one was a liar. At first, it was funny to me, but then I began to understand that this was not how I imagined meeting my mom, and these women ruined the moment that I dreamed of. Realizing that I had nothing to do here, I fled to my bedroom. I began crying, not understanding why it was me. Was it really possible to say such lies without thinking of the child's feelings and experiences? How is it possible to come here out of selfish reasons and pretend to be a good person? After a while, our caregiver came to me. She looked sadly into my eyes and said that the woman had left, but another one came in. I simply refused to go. I could not handle another scene, but the caregiver told me to come down since this woman had proof of my origin. When I went down to the hall, I saw a woman. She smiled at me and asked me to listen to her. Her name was Laura, and she introduced herself as my aunt. She told me exactly when I was born and even what blanket I was wrapped in. And then she sadly said that for many years, my mom had been lying motionless. Nobody knew that she was pregnant at the time. When this became apparent, my mom's father kicked her out of the house without any things or money and forcefully made the whole family not to communicate with her. Everyone was afraid of the dad and followed his orders, and my aunt cried telling me that as soon as I was born, my mom had nowhere to live. And even after the birth of his granddaughter, Grandpa did not take her back to the house. My mother slept at the station, begged for money, but realized that I would not survive in such conditions, and therefore she left me in the orphanage. She returned to the streets again, where she became very ill, and since then she'd been living with my aunt, who had gotten married and left her family home by that time. My mom was very sick, and there was no money for her treatment. She was always in her bed and cried every day. My aunt said that all this time they thought that I was adopted and did not want to interfere with my life. But when they saw me in the newspapers, they immediately realized that I was that very girl. I was an exact copy of my mom in her youth. I hugged my aunt and said that I wanted to see my mother, and the caregivers let me go for a couple of hours. I went up to the bed where my mother was lying and I hugged her tightly. She began to cry bitterly and ask for forgiveness. She asked me to understand her. And you know, after I found out the whole truth, I did not hold a grudge against her. She just couldn't keep me. 6 months have passed and my aunt has gotten all the documents and I still live with her, but I'm looking for a cozy small house for my mom and I. The money that I won, I spent wisely. My mom is going through treatment and there are improvements. I gave some money to the orphanage where I grew up because if not for the people there, what would have happened to me? It's scary to think about it. Life goes on. Dreams come true. And you guys too should believe that all your dreams will come true.